Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Centre for Legal Innovations webinar series. We're really delighted to have you back, and most particularly delighted to welcome back our friend Carl White. And Carl, as you know, has been working with us really over what has now developed into a series around client experience, and we're really delighted to be able to launch that with him, and most particularly as part of his Centre Distinguished Fellowship. So the title for today's session is Client Experience Success, a New Toolkit for Legal Transformation. But I guess Carl is going to add to that legal transformation today, because it remains kind of a work in progress.
And this legal transformation in progress, I think, was probably a better title.
That's right. As it should be, right? Because
exactly.
It's changing all the time. And so he's going to present using Miro. And if you haven't used that before, it's a great tool. So it's a kind of an opportunity to see that in action as well. But it's also going to really collect together the work that Carl's been doing over a period of time for us now, and really purposing that into something that's practical and user-friendly, and that you're going to be able to apply obviously in your practices. So let me hand you over to Carl White. As you know, in addition to being a CLI Distinguished Fellow, Carl is the founder and the Chief Experience Officer of CXINLAW. So Carl, thanks very much again for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to this one. So over to you.
Thanks for that lovely introduction, Terry. Okay, let's go. There's quite a nice number of quotes already on the Miro screen here. I saw this one on LinkedIn just several days ago from Simon Sinek: a service not about doing what's asked of us, it's about doing more than what's asked of us. So I actually hope I am able to do perhaps a little bit more than you expected during the course of this presentation, although there is a lot to cover, so hopefully I'll get through as much as I can. The other point here as well, client experience being any moment where an impression of service is perceived by clients in our legal context. So I just sort of, I'd pop that up there as well, together with the idea, or the reality, in fact, not just an idea, that we all know what great service, what fantastic service looks like, sounds like, and feels like, and we want more of that. And that's a really important starting point, I think, for our exploration of client experience in law. So let me just cover a few bases first of all here. That the fellowship objectives with the centre could be best captured perhaps with these four post-it notes. So explore the client's legal experience, service culture and its development, and challenges in CX transformation. In doing that, the idea is, and through my own work with law firms as well, to develop the strategies and approaches and tools to more or less realize this CX advantage in law, whether you're a law firm, legal team, in-house counsel, and so on. I was really interested as well in trying to get to a point where we can provide the basis upon which a robust business case and pathway for CX transformation is kind of there, and that can be endorsed by legal service providers. And I think so much of what we're doing in client experience at the moment is still about kind of activation and education. And there's only so many legal service providers who actually then choose to invest. So, part of in CX, so part of this is, I think, really about being able to say, this is what client experience is, these are the benefits, and this is the how it can be done with you, for you, with your team. And that then those law firms feel in a good position to actually take this on. Of course, the more firms that do that, the happier we'll all be, I think, clients, law firms, and everyone involved. So then the idea is to create an environment in which our experience, CX methods, and know-how can be shared. And of course, this presentation is part of that. The CX series is part of that as well. This presentation is about illustrating the research journey, about offering some key findings, taking a tour of the strategies and tools, perhaps building a little bit of practical understanding for you, and I hope inspiring you along the way. One of the reasons why I'm using Miro is for those reasons as well, that I'm feeling increasingly confined by the box that is PowerPoint and Google Slides, so kind of breaking out that little bit and presenting information in different ways. The other point here as well is actually, Miro is a tool that I use with law firms, and if anything, collaboration has increased rather than decreased within this COVID period. And it's through the good use of tools like this, actually, and inviting teams into this kind of digital environment that has actually allowed that to happen, more or less. The other thing before we kind of get into the body of this talk that I should recognise here are all the participants that have taken, they've been a part of the project for me. So we've got the fantastic directors of Lynn & Brown Lawyers in Perth, Jackie and Stephen, the CEO of Moores, Tess Van Doon. We've got Annie Briggs from Gilbert and Tobin. We've also got the Legal Services Board, Jenny Pakula and Alice Duggan. All of those people, and thank you, have been involved in helping me look at the world from different perspectives, looking at client experience development, issues, challenges, and what some of the solutions might be. And I've spent an hour or more with each of those individuals and had a really lively discussion, and combined that then with ongoing fieldwork with all of these types of firms, together with some secondary research, obviously, around client experience. And I'm never far from actually, my own learning in this area and building upon my own learning. So I'm not sure I can do all of these individuals and their phenomenal work in their own organizations. I'm not sure I can do all of that justice during this presentation, but I will try and give you a hint really as to what they've told me and where they've gone with CX development. Okay, with those guys in mind, and also with my own client experience fieldwork, it actually dawned on me quite recently that actually there's some identifiable traits of CX firms, which has come out of the interviews, it's come out of the work that I'm doing in this area. And, for one of perhaps better ways of describing what those 6 might be, this is not set in stone, none of this is. Number one being, these firms, I recognize them as being, somewhat connected to purpose, a sense of purpose. They're really attuned to their environment. So the legal environment, the commercial environment, but the broader service market. They understand that that's moving on, for instance. The search for excellence, we'll explore that one a bit in a moment. Adopting a growth mindset internally with all of their team members, the organization overall, then actually making that decision to invest in development. And some of these organizations that I work with, I commend them. They're bold, they've been brave, they've actually invested in actually taking that lead position, which is number 6. I'm not sure any of these law firms that I've worked with would actually say, we set out to be a leader, not a laggard. And they might even downplay some of their achievements in this area. But without a doubt, they've kind of forged this path for discovering what a focus on client experience really has to offer to their business, to their organization. So already right from the top, you might be thinking, or would like to think about, is this your organization or legal team? Where are you in relation to these 6 traits? In a way, moving from naive to natural, to kind of not being aware at all and not having started anything in this area, not having developed anything, which is not going to be the case for anyone on this webinar, through to a point where it's all so natural to us now. It's thoroughly embedded, operationalized. And it's part of our DNA. It's part of our culture. That actually is a maturity scale, a client experience maturity scale, in actual fact. And it's something that I would certainly like to work on further and actually be able to help legal providers to measure that for themselves. So that's certainly an identified need and something that will be taking my focus in the near future. So moving on from that then, calling out a few of those, being connected to purpose came through very, very strongly in the interviews that I conducted. So there are some wonderful quotes here from the people I spoke with, from Stephen Brown at Lynn & Brown, saying, you know, our goal is to transform the legal experience. So that's kind of like being connected with more than simply doing good work. There's a higher purpose there. Tessa from Moores, with a statement like, you know, our values are focused on creating positive impact for our people, those to whom we provide value and service. That's what attracted me to Moores. So Tessa, having joined Moores more recently, taking on that role from David Wells. So again, you know, the sense that, yes, there's a commercial focus, but it's also about our people and how we bring this to life with our people, the employee experience, being connected to that purpose. Even, you know, Jenny Pakula at the Legal Services Board, that ambition around, there's a lot of flexibility in designing legal services that to make it better for them and their clients. And that's the future that I'm trying to encourage. I love that statement from Jenny about, you know, again, the kind of higher goal, the kind of roadmap that we're all working toward if we, you know, we have that connection to purpose. Going back to Tessa as well, who actually quoted Maya Angelou here. I like what Maya's saying. If you always are trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be. And I think we're often spending time doing what we're doing in business as usual in our organization, and maybe making some small improvements. And of course, that's a really important part of client experience, marginal gains. But again, that perhaps slightly more ambitious goal of being remarkable. Perhaps it's not quite good enough just to satisfy clients. Because if that's what we're doing, then okay, tick, but we might even be moving backwards. So, you know, the Legal Services Board, I think, would recognize the idea of, yes, we want to deal with complaints, we want to make sure we're delivering a satisfactory client experience, but that actually there's all this potential to go even further than that as well with our level of client experience. So Tessa says, we aspire to delight our clients and be remembered for how we made them feel during the process, how we made them feel during the process. So again, it's bigger than, dare I say, just doing the law, connected to purpose. The other one down here is that search for excellence. This is definitely a hallmark of firms that choose to do something on client experience. So, you know, first of all, that above legal expertise, price, product, you know, customer experience is becoming the more important aspect of that. It's of course you can't do law without having that legal technical brilliance, but you know, the client experience is a differentiator. So again, Jenny says, you know, CX is more important than it's ever been. But there's a disconnect between legal delivery and the ease of the consumer experience in other sectors. Clients are beginning to ponder, why is it not the same in law? And her co-worker, Alice, then went on to say, you know, the question is whether or not the legal profession can keep up with the client's new service expectations along those lines. So, you know, what I've noticed in the research, but also in the field work, is that these firms, they know that they say some good things about themselves. You know, our DNA, we unlock new opportunities for clients, creating meaningful, enduring partnerships. This is McCullough Robertson, and undoubtedly they do. But how does that look and sound every moment with the client? We really need to understand how well we're coming through on that point. You know, when Gilbert and Tobin says here, you know, there's no doubt the business world is evolving rapidly. You know, the firm is committed to developing innovative solutions. Okay, so what does that actually mean for us as a business? And how will the client actually experience that as well? So this is really about the overall service performance, knowing that you've got an audience, your clients, and that they, you know, their opinion matters. And we need to understand the world from their point of view. We need to understand their sentiments toward the service that we're delivering. And that's what I mean by that search for excellence. And actually that's brave, you know, that we're asking our clients. We want to see the world from their point of view. We want to get to this kind of data around, you know, how many positive comments did the client have? How many not so positive comments? How are we doing out of 10? What does achieving 10 actually look like when we say meaningful and enduring partnerships? Okay. So what's the reality, and how is that built? How is it actually delivered at every touch point? Do we look and sound as good as we actually are? So search for excellence. The other one I'll just call out here as well is that adopting the growth mindset. So, clearly there's advantage, commercial advantage here, and actually Kim from McCulloch Robertson talks in terms of conversion. She talks in terms of sales even. She talks in terms of commercial advantage at her firm, but she also does that knowing that it's about the relationship. It's about building trust, and trust being something you earn, not just kind of deliver. Underneath that kind of sales and commercial focus. So there's that kind of commercial imperative that you can unlock and do something about through client experience. But it's also about knowing that client experience is about internal and external. So it's about how are we delivering the work? What's our process? Can we make things easier for ourselves as operators? As much as it is about, can we, as Tessa would say, delight our clients on the external side, internal and external. And if we can put those things together, then we're going to get a business and organization that's thriving in many domains. Tessa again puts this, I think, really nicely in the conversation I had with her. We start with understanding the problem. So, that's something we might be exploring a little bit as we move through. And that is as much about what the client's needs are, what the improvement options are for the client, as well as looking internally into what the business improvements options are for operational efficiencies and to the benefits of and to benefit our people. So you can see that kind of multi-layered view here from Tessa. And, it is the hallmark of firms that I've found that we've been able to work with, that it's about the operational efficiencies. It's about how we develop people and our capabilities. And yes, of course, it's about how we deliver to our clients. And all of that might be described as that growth mindset. So these things are important, but clearly the point of this project was to go deeper. The point of the work is obviously then to realise those ambitions. And through the work that I've done as a fellow, again, looking at the multiple perspectives on CX development, here are some screen grabs of all of us having a chat, as we have been doing over the last couple of months. And what I really wanted to do was, out of all of that super rich information, and almost, kind of thinking about, how rich this information was, just to spend that 40 minutes to an hour with these fantastic legal professionals, but how rich this could be for you if you're having similar conversations also with your colleagues and also with your clients, and the benefits of doing that. So kind of thinking about this always from multiple angles. There were some key discussion areas, and I suppose I had a job on really to think about how those outputs could be analysed and then grouped into useful themes. And what I discovered, partly substantiating what I had suspected and had already started to build into my own business and consulting with law firms, but also was able to evolve these things. That there were kind of certainly four, and in the middle then the fifth element being, if you do these things well, then you're going to be setting yourselves up for client experience success in the long term. So I was able, I think, to kind of say, well, okay, all of these conversations I'm having could be organized under leadership. So, how do we lead client experience? How do we, not just at the senior level, but how do we, all of us as employees of a legal organization, how do we take the lead with this? And what are some of the challenges and issues there? So there's the lead point. There's insight. So, how well or not we seek insight from our co-workers, but also obviously go out to our client and understand the voice of the client and listen to that voice. Then, of course, it was about innovation. So what do we mean by innovation? What do we mean by that in the client experience domain? Would we describe ourselves as innovative? What are some of the tools we use? And then a really extensive conversation with all of the participants on the learning client experience, but more broadly, the capability building, the learning and development, and the embedding side of this. So once you've focused and you've invested in that client experience focus, how do you then make sure that sticks and that's embedded? And I can't say everyone has all the answers here, and nor do I, but those are the themes. So I thought what we would do next is take a look at each one of these. And of course, this is where I need to be a bit careful with how deep we go during this presentation. So bear with me. I will not go through everything. So lead CX. I'm going to defer to Tessa again here with her quote. The CX and the EX piece is fundamentally about the value that we are delivering and the experience we are offering both to our people and to those that engage with us. Fascinating that for her team at Moores, those things just dovetail together. They're almost one and the same. You can't have one without the other. You can't have an amazing, remarkable client experience without really putting the work in to kind of building that employee experience as well. One of the reasons why Apple is here is they would call this an all-around mandate. So everyone has a role to play in delivering phenomenally good service, and we need to almost enable. We need to be able to enable our employees, our staff, to do that at even better levels. And in doing that, we're making the world easier for them as well as the client, of course. So there were three. There's an ABC to all of these. So formulating and positioning the business case for client experience was a topic. Then a strategic approach to development, and then a very important, rich theme in all the conversations was empowering people and teams to then almost run with that strategy. Tessa would describe, the teamwork that has been established, or the teams that have been established. Those teams are a committee of the board. And so already you can see, the empowerment approach that's kind of been taken there. So maybe just hover over some of the quotes here, maybe just to bring this to life a little bit, that Anu Briggs at Gilbert and Tobin, there was a lot of challenge in the beginning around creating the space to be able to do the work in investing in a more advanced firm. And Tessa says, we try to focus on embedding this culture, this future where it's about collective leadership, essentially. Everyone has a part to play in that. It's about focusing on that business case, not once, but often and on an ongoing basis, and looking for those quick wins, or the wins that you get through actually starting to do the work. So Anu again says, so at this point we're not only winning work based on legal brilliance, but now some of that's being driven by different parts of the firm as well. So again, that these different roles and functions, because we're all games makers in the client experience, we're all actors on that stage, that everyone's coming together to essentially win work and delight clients. So that this has become now almost like a revenue driver for Anu at Gilbert and Tobin, not a cost center. Jackie at Lynn Brown, I think, puts it really well. And you need to get everyone involved as much as you can, as early as you can, so that the whole team is buying into the process. And Stephen, also a director at Lynn Brown, one of our missions is empowering our clients and the experience is also about empowering our team. So that was the underlying spirit that drove them and brought them to continue to be enthusiastic about the process. So bringing people into this process is absolutely key. And so, where that actually leads us, I think, is to, what's the actual development strategy for client experience when you put your kind of leading CX hat on? So I think actually that breaks down to these elements at a very top level. And this is something that certainly evolved during my time as a fellow at the centre. So we've got this idea of activating, first of all, within your organisation, of starting the conversations, of using that business case that you kind of evidenced, of also bringing insight, external and internal insight, and using that as a provocation, as a catalyst, as a point of engagement with your teams. Then actually doing something with that information, continuing to use insight, so that you can actually innovate the client's journey, uplift the client's journey, make those changes that will actually be noticed by the client and also will be noticed and appreciated by the operators. And then, of course, embedding it. So again, Tessa, it's an ongoing process of restating and reinvigorating that business case, reminding people what the return on investment actually is. I knew on this side, coming back to the activate, my first point was talking to users at all levels. Let's call them clients, she actually said. The clerk, the graduate, lawyer, the partner, all of those people, from her point of view, are internal clients. Putting ourselves in their shoes to understand and collaborate, then creating something off the back of that. She said, I partner with people from different teams. I get them excited about being involved. And she's spot on. And certainly that's often my role, is that kind of, approaching it with energy and excitement, but underpinned with insight and with this business case. If we look at this and we ask ourselves, so how easy or how hard? Well, I think Tessa makes a good point here. It's about this idea of being realistic, essentially. I would be realistic about it and say it's not an overnight fix, but I love this, but there are overnight wins. And she describes that's really affirming. It feels like you're making progress and you can see the tangible impacts. We wouldn't do it otherwise. If it were invisible, we'd really struggle to get people to invest time and energy. I think that's such a good point, throughout this process, particularly at this design stage, where you're working together to kind of look for those opportunities to remove the dissatisfiers the client might be experiencing on the journey, to identify those hotspots and kind of do something about them. And there are a number of early wins. But I don't always call them quick wins. We call them almost like kind of just do it items, because even the just do it items are not necessarily a quick win. However, we can get to places quite fast. And it's really important that we do, and that's also then shared, that's also then showcased with others. That's what Tessa's talking about here, I think. So that's just kind of hovering over lead for a moment. Of course, there's so much more I could say and that we'd want to make available in the CX series around this. But I'm going to whiz on and look at insight. So this is the kind of second of the four themes that we unpack together in those interviews. So again, the ABC here is, having a metric for measuring service, whether it be the Net Promoter Score or others. I mean, NPS is a globally recognized kind of service standard tool of measurement, but there are others. But understanding what those tools are and having them available, bringing them to the party. Then actually gaining some insight, and not only gaining it, but acting upon it, leveraging it, using it well. And that more, Tessa would say, we've had the payoff that they've had from not only speaking with clients, but then acting upon it has been absolutely immense for them. But then the idea as well is it's kind of integrating feedback and feedback tools into the design of the experience. So that might be, how you actually onboard a new client and what you speak to them about in terms of, the experience that they will have with you as the legal results are worked toward. It might be that you are actually designing into the process an after action review to reflect both internally on how that matter went, perhaps not with all matters, but also externally, often a missing piece, and asking similar questions and almost having an adult conversation as well with at least a good number of your clients to see what can be learned. So, you know, if we put a kind of a customer journey mapping lens on that, then that was also something that I explored with participants, and clearly this is a very critical tool when doing the work that my team does with law firms as well. So, you know, any of you that have attended my presentations before, maybe you're now familiar with, you know, the 5-step journey and all the touch points within this. I think it's kind of interesting that journey mapping, I've placed journey mapping in insight and not in innovate or design, because I think what we've discovered and what's been, I think, evidence through having these conversations is journey mapping is such a great tool to do first with your team, because it really just connects your team with, you know, what's our backstage process, what's our onstage process, what are the highs and lows of that from our point of view. So officially, I guess this could be called assumptive journey mapping. So you are making some assumptions, but it's about your internal viewpoint, which is really valuable, and it's a fantastic starting point. Many firms that I've worked with actually feel much more comfortable starting here than saying, right, okay, let's immediately go out and choose clients to interview, or let's immediately, you know, introduce a survey into the mix. Let's actually start with what we think we might know. And wouldn't it be valuable anyway to actually get an understanding of, well, how do we do the work? You know, what does that work? What's the flow of that work? How does work flow? And it's often surprising that for me at least, that law firms and legal organizations actually don't have this kind of blueprint. Or they might have something that obviously just innately that kind of guides them through a matter, all the precedents and so on, but kind of coming to that and looking at that afresh is really, really important as a point of insight. So Stephen Brown at Lynn & Brown, you know, mapping the stages and steps was really informative. It helped us become conscious of how clients may be feeling and experiencing the way that we are interacting with them. So, you know, again, putting ourselves into the client's position, but also remaining in the operator's position. How do we do the work? The other point I thought was interesting here when looking at the legal journey is Jenny's point from the Legal Services Board. You know, complaints arise when clients don't have a say in something that's intimately concerned with their welfare and future. I like this bit. For a client, it's as though they've been thrown in the backseat of a car and the lawyer has gone off road. How brilliant is that from Jenny? And when you look at this critical client experience tool, there's no doubt about it. This is the heart of the matter, this tool. And you begin to think, oh, you know, where does the client go out? You know, what are the highs and low points? Where are we our own worst enemy? Where's the friction? And you start building that picture. You begin to see exactly where, you know, improvements, small but very meaningful sometimes, can actually be made. And we often talk about, you know, kind of concierging the client through the client journey. It's almost as though we're in hospitality as much as we're in law. And actually, if we look at it from that point of view, some of the biggest differentiators and improvements could be made, almost like kind of putting the law hat off and putting the hospitality hat on for a moment. How do we host the client through their matter to get to the best legal results? And it's very clear that the firms I spoke with, the firms who've done something about this and worked with me, you know, they've really taken that on. It's the arm around the shoulder, leading them through, and it's something that Kim at McCulloch Robertson would also talk about. It's the human side of law. So it is important, and it's a critical tool here to then obviously speak with clients. So that, you know, there's client listening techniques. There's ways of doing this. There's discussion guides and techniques for having quality conversations with clients, whether it's an external specialist or even yourself. The key thing is that we do it. And Stephen from Lynn & Brown here said, so the logical step was to put ourselves in the client seat and their position and ask, you know, how do they experience us? So getting to know your clients better. And interestingly, from Janie's point of view, from the regulator's point of view, the ultimate audience is not us as the regulator, it's the client, and the client has to understand what you're doing and why. Client has to come first, and compliance has to be focused on the benefits to the client. So even there, yes, compliance is often the reason why firms say we can't do that or we can't do that. It's because there's rules, there's regulations, there's compliance. But actually, in speaking with the client and thinking about this, there's all sorts of ways improvements can be made without tripping up. So here is some visuals around insight, the use of personas, both internally and externally, to build that picture, that 360-degree picture of your client's needs and wants and experiences. And then also understanding, analyzing and understanding, that there are hundreds of potential uplifts we could make, some of which the clients have suggested, some of which we've suggested. But which of those are basic, which might move the client to feel satisfied, and which might actually move the client to be delighted, and where do we want to put our energy and effort, and what's going to have the most impact? So, there's an approach to that. There's some good analysis that needs to be done there to see the wood through the trees. Again, the important point is that we gather that insight. We give clients an opportunity to tell us how they feel and what they might want that's different to how we've delivered. The regulator, what we see as complaints is probably the tip of the iceberg. We have 6,000 to 7,000 inquiries through the Legal Services Board, and that's to say 1,500 to 2,000 complaints a year, but we don't hear from everyone. So I think it's important that we don't focus this on complaints necessarily, because what we found is that this is as much about understanding what we do well, and clients will spend a lot of time on that, on the positive points, which allow you then to build on that and kind of grow the relationship you've got with them as well. But it is about looking for those opportunities. So Kim at McCullough said, lawyers, it's a really interesting point this, I think, lawyers are idealistic. They want to help people. Sometimes I guess that isn't ideal in the context of law, because it's really tough to sometimes actually do that. But it can become about the next matter, the next client in your billable budget. So it's important to stop and focus and have methods to gather that client insight. So you can begin to come back to this journey here. You can begin to look at this with fresh eyes and find those opportunities to improve. Hopefully you're still with me as we now look at the third of these strands to kind of be substantiated from the research and the conversation. So this one's about actually now the innovation process, the improvement, if we want to call it that. So we're working with a firm at the moment, and they said, can we just call it improvement? Do we have to call it innovation? Recognition that innovation is a buzzword, and we need to understand what that means, and maybe it just means improvement. And in fact, Anu put it quite well when I was talking with her. It was a rather unfair question about how would you describe innovation at the firm, and she laughed and she said, well, look, I think in simplest terms, innovation is about reviewing and refining the process, like the way in which we work, to have most impact. I mean, how else could you really put it? Refining what we do, reviewing the process, taking the right actions in order to have most impact. So again, there's an ABC, I think, to this strand. It's the clarity that everyone needs on the start point, through that insight, through perhaps what we mean by innovate and some of the changes we might want to make, an understanding of how we actually do something about what we now know we need to improve. What came through strongly, and I totally agree here, is the kind of magic happens with a team-based approach. So Anu again said, I think that innovation occurs, on the individual level, at the team level, at the group level, and at the firm level. It takes place at all of those levels, and she would describe it as a multi-layered approach. And again, that's certainly where I've seen the magic happening, that opportunity to bring people together efficiently and with some structure to work on developing the client experience. And then, that being said, with effective tools. Many of you, I think, joining me today will obviously now be aware of the design thinking, recognized design thinking process. But I guess by pasting this in here, I'm talking of drawing attention to understand, explore, and materialize. I think that, again, that's quite neat, isn't it? Where are we at? What does the client think? What do we think? What are some of the problems we actually need to solve rather than the ones we don't? Do we actually need technology? Is this a technology solution, or is it something very different to that? So exploring that and then implementing. So Jenny emphasized the empathy point around starting with why are we doing what we're doing in the way that we're doing it. For example, if you have a highly stressed client, is a text-heavy cost agreement the right approach? How differently can we do that? And she suggests how differently we might be able to do that. And I think I've got a point down there, some which we might be able to get to. Alice, her counterpart, said, balancing that out a little bit, that, being consumer focused doesn't translate to my client wanted it that way, so that's how we did it. So we've got to be careful. It's not about bending too much toward how a client might like the ins and outs of the legal work delivered, such as not presenting a cost agreement, I think was an example that was given here. However, in general, I think it's the important point. However, in general, if the client is in the forefront of your mind, the regulator doesn't need to be. There is a sense, if you operate well, if you have the client in your mind, if you're designing for the client and doing that within some guardrails, doing that well in the ways we're describing here, that there's a good result all round, including for the regulator. And I think there's some peace of mind in there as well around, actually having the freedom to and the flexibility to actually explore this, to actually think, okay, how might we design this better? Knowing that can actually be done, that that's okay. I think it's important just to spend some time here because, yes, what is innovation? What are we innovating? I've kind of alluded to, but here it's about, so what then? How do we actually make this happen? And during the course of the fellowship in the year or so that I've been doing this out in the field with clients, what's come out of that is, this idea of CX teams. They don't have to be called CX teams, but, teams, basically. The teams, bringing the team together, bringing teams together to review the findings, to develop the solutions for themselves, to seek and use client feedback, to actually, to come back to the design thinking point here, to create some prototypes. Perhaps that one of those prototypes is actually how we deliver advice, how we present advice. Perhaps it's actually going further than just billing the client at the end. Perhaps it's actually about an after matter report that could be designed. So, then actually presenting those to clients as prototypes and getting that feedback to help you implement and ultimately to help you operationalize. So again, Anu's point about multi-layered teams here, giving people the opportunity to be a part of that. And to be a part of that, interestingly, around the themes that you may have identified from the insight work you've done. So maybe, you have 4 themes, like the ones you can see here, that the teams are created around, or it might be that the teams are created around stages of the journey. Where's the journey? It's over here, isn't it? One client that we're working with now through this fellowship period, they've got teams related to each of these journeys, and they're working on parts of the journey, and they've been given the autonomy to actually do that. But in the middle, it's important that we execute well. So we kind of call it the CX hub, but for Moores, it's the Inno hub. it could be any one of a number of kind of descriptions, but this is where coaching is given to these teams, where they might need help through being facilitated. It's where ideas that are being developed can be approved and kind of thought about in more structured ways. It's about making sure that client feedback is coming in, that we are collaborating with clients, that we do have access to resources and support, and we have some governance and we have a project office there. So this might be one person, it might be several people, but it's important to almost have that nerve center, if you like, in the middle of this implementation, and that it's, you're thinking about this strategically and it's well executed. And finally, the final component of this, is obviously not the final, shouldn't be really, but the service user should be at the heart, in the middle of this diagram potentially. But your clients are the service users of this effort. The board is an internal sponsor and user of this as well, or the management team are as well. So these groups need to bear that in mind. Equally, your internal clients and colleagues and staff members are, if you like, internal clients and service users as well. So there are multiple stakeholders. And the fascinating thing about kind of forming these teams and helping these teams is almost this kind of, new project management, kind of business acumen, creative thinking, adaptive mindset, all of those things that almost happen not so much by accident, but they're an output from working in this way. So let's come to Jackie first. Her comment on working this way in the interview with her was, for me, it was a really good opportunity to have close working relationships with people who are not in my individual practice area. So, law firms often say, we work as one team. Well, this is working in one team. You're actually doing what you say you do, I guess. It also gave, typo there, also gave everyone a voice in areas that are important to them and that they needed to have input on. So, the energy and the buy-in and the commitment that's gained through, basically giving everyone a voice. You're giving the client a voice and taking that seriously, but you're also giving your employees a choice because you're actively bringing them into the conversation and putting some structure around that they can work with in a time-efficient way. We collaborate and enable success across a number of different key pillars in the business, both internally and externally, internal, external. And so I think assembling multidisciplinary teams is so important. I hear that term a lot, multidisciplinary teams. But here's how that might look. And this is actually a legacy thing as well. That this is not necessarily a one and done project, although lots of ticks will be happening, lots of quick wins will be happening. This is a systemic thing, actually. It's this kind of a systemic project where what you're hoping to do is leave the organization with this way of working, that you've built the service culture around this way of working, that you've shifted a mindset and behavior. All right, so the final one, and I'm cognizant of time and maybe leaving some questions at the end as I bring all this together, but it's learn CX. So I guess that's the embedding point. And there's an A, B, and C here as well that came out of the interviews and my own experience. An expanded skill set for all roles. I think it's easy. We're always talking about lawyers, but it's for all roles and functions. That's an expanded tool set beyond just the technical and doing what it is we've done and how we've always done it that way. Human-centered skills may not now surprise those joining me today, but just the real focus on that empathy side of working at a human level with people internally and externally, and then build and embed those capabilities over a project like that. So capturing that. A couple of points here to back that up. Everyone will have a different opinion as to whether or not we call these things soft skills. Anu wouldn't call them a soft skill. She firmly put this in terms of, a building of a capability, almost a hard skill, not a soft one. Anyway, soft skills are more important than ever, focusing on the things that build confidence, relationships and trust in the lawyer resolving the client's difficulties. Kim McCullough and this is a great one in terms of, the learn and the empathy and the human skills. We can read and act and understand the risks associated with the matter or challenge or legal issue. What we're talking about is something completely human, and it's outside of their, often lawyers, technical skill set. It's completely human, this, and now there is this, of course, new focus on as I say, those human-centered skills. But where I think we need to hover over this is perhaps point C, that it's important to build that playbook through delivering the strategy that we've discussed, through taking these steps and implementing the way that we've been discussing it here. That if all of that begins to be captured into what I would describe as a playbook, and that's kind of become more evident through the period of the fellowship, is the kind of the requirement here to make sure we're capturing skills, tools, and techniques for ongoing client experience success. That every firm and legal team has that kind of functionality, the ability to do that. How do we turn these types of sessions that you might experience in focusing on client experience into the firm's DNA, into just how we do things around here? So there's all sorts of points to make here, but capturing visions and values. So this is actually PEXA here. Better together, make it happen, grow for good, be excellent, change the game. These values were built together as a team, built together with the service users, so they're meaningful and they're captured and they're referred to and they're brought to life. So that actually, and he says here is client experience being something we want to be a differentiator. So we talk about that a lot. We refer to this term, we bring it to life. She would say we talk about it regularly. And Kim's saying here that's a behavior shift as well as a mindset shift. So it's building that into the way in which we practice. And so, documenting these things together and making sure that they're then used going forward is important. The actual journey mapping work that's been done, turning that almost into a service blueprint. So you've got that, again, you've got that documented to refer to continue to improve, that it's not simply a one or done, that we all know what each touch point should look like and sound like. And again, then templates and the educational resources as well, finding what the collateral is and what the assets need to be to support delivering at a remarkable level. These are actually dialogue guides for first conversations. And then also collateral and tools for the client. How do we describe the pathway that the client might be going on? Can we use that information with the client that we've produced through this process? So these are kind of embedding tools. Okay, guys, deep breath, checking the time. So what do we have? Well, we have an emerging CX framework. Here are some of the elements combined, not to spend too much more time on this. A strategy for effective CX development. So we've got the activate, design, embed. It's data-driven as well, internal data and external data. Then, we've got this idea of multi-layered teams, giving everyone the opportunity to be involved, to feel empowered, to have also that structure and some of that support. So there's a delivery approach to implementation. And then in the middle, and we've spent a lot of our time here, it's almost like the kind of operating system, of lead, insight, learn, and innovate. So that's where, there are a number of tools that fit into there and a number of competencies that fit into there. And I think that what I've learned is that there's probably a scorecard or a diagnostic in there as well about, where is your firm right now in each of these critical areas? Where are you doing well? Where is the firm deficient? What needs to be built up to make sure that before, during, and after undertaking a focus on client experience, that those things are built and kept. So therein lies that kind of CX playbook underneath all of that as well, making sure that we've got the tools, it's part of our induction, we can refer to things, we've built it together, we've co-created our playbook together. I appreciate there's a lot to go through there. And each and every one of those can be unpacked, but where to from here? I would say, for all of you, for all of us, it's about identifying your CX advantage in your current position. So it almost comes back to, connecting to that purpose, understanding the market, that growth mindset. Where are you with those things? And bringing some insight to that. Recognizing there is actually an emerging strategy and there is actually a toolkit, that there's actually support there as well. To make those things happen for you as an organization. In going through it like this, I would say that it might sound like a really massive project. And I think one of the notes back in the content, in the early bits of the presentation, Tessa would say that, again, it's not necessarily an overnight project, but there are overnight wins, and it's really important that the overnight wins are also focused upon those marginal gains. The idea of we keep on plussing our show, as Walt Disney would say. So, the 1%ers, in fact, getting those things right. In terms of just bringing it all back for you all, though, I think, a great starting place, or a great place to continue the conversation really is with the new CX series on the centre's website, because you're going to be able to binge on lots of really useful content, regardless of where you are on the journey, whether you want to start small, whether you've actually decided, no, we want to undertake this as a transformational project. There's going to be some great material there, and some material that's going to be added to that as well, further development. And the idea of that scorecard as well, that now sits outside of the fellowship, but it's certainly something that I'll be working on. So Terry, I think it might be a good time for me to take a deep breath now and for you to say something.
To say thank you very much for a fabulous presentation again, because they're always fabulous, and to also encourage folks to address those questions to Carl. So do for sure contact him. You'll find him on LinkedIn. You'll also find lots of links to him on the CLI website. So please do feel free to do that. Really, really important. And I think, Carl, as I was listening to all of this and to the wrap up, the words that kept coming to me were that there's value in the process. Yeah. And that, you get to the end result, but there's so much value in the process in the ways that you've enumerated, but just kept coming back all the time. Just the richness of the discussions and all of the different places that it goes. So there's value in this process. There's certainly value in the process that you spoke about as well for the series. So do jump in and spend some time there. So Carl, thank you, as I say, very much again. Thank you everyone who attended and listened to this. Don't forget to go back and have a look at those resources in addition to this one. We hope it will be supportive, and do obviously reach out to Carl. To those of you who are members of the Legalpreneurs Lab, I also just want to remind you that Carl is one of our geeky gurus, and so you have the opportunity to engage with him on that basis as well. So folks, don't forget, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of those places where you would expect to see us. And also, because there is a lot obviously to go through here, you'll have the opportunity to revisit this in a video format as well, for you to be able to, listen again, or spend the time with your colleagues to kind of go through this as well. So Carl, again, thank you very much. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing all of you back for another one and next time. Until then, bye.